Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to a series of videos in which I am reading you a book. We are reading from the King James Bible. This is the English Bible, the King James Bible. This is the Norton Critical Edition. We are reading the Gospel according to St. Mark. And we are up to chapter 5. Very much enjoying, I want to say this one more time, I'm very much enjoying the fact that so many of you are emailing me about this now. Some of you every day. Or every time I do a reading. And also lots of Voxer messages. And I want to stress again how much I'm enjoying the fact that you're all getting this. I would say probably that you're getting the spirit in which I'm doing this. I would say that probably the majority of emails that I'm getting are from people who are actively, happily, wonderfully, warmly, organically Christian. You believe in Christians. And who are loving this. And I'm glad of that because this is not meant to be an attack on your faith. We are going at a literary document. Your faith obviously doesn't come from a literary document, right? You're not in Dianetics. Your faith does not come from a literary document at all. The literary document is a door to your faith, or the spark in Kindle. You don't need the spark anymore. You've got the flame going now. So we are looking at this text. That's all, and having fun. We're looking at this text and having fun. We're trying to shed the tremendous theological and liturgical weight of this stuff and just look at what's on the page. There's no harm in that. There can't be any harm in that. I'm glad that a lot of you are seeing that. A lot of you are having fun, and that's good. That's very good. So we're just going to keep going here. We've got a lot more Mark to do. I'm not doing this every day. I skipped a day again yesterday. We're up to chapter 5, and chapter 5 is tough. Starts out tough for me. One of the toughest stories in the New Testament for me. And they came over unto the other side of the sea, into the country of the Gadarenes. And when he was come out of the ship, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no man could bind him, no, not with chains, because he had often been bound with fetters and chains, and the chains had been plucked asunder by him, and the fetters broken in pieces. Neither could any man tame him. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains, in the tombs, crying and cutting himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus far off, he ran and worshipped him, and cried with a loud voice, and said, What have I to do with thee, Jesus, Son of God, thou Son of the Most High God? I abjure thee by God, that thou torment me not. For he said unto him, Come out of the man, thou unclean spirit. And he asked him, What is thy name? And he answered, saying, My name is Legion, for we are many. And he besought him much that he would not send him away out of the country. Very interesting here that these spirits all know Jesus. They know him on sight, even though presumably he didn't look like this in heaven. They know him anyway, on sight. And here we're told that this evil spirit worships him. But they're also, notice, this is not the first time that Mark has shown us that these evil spirits are begging him for mercy. They're not saying, oh, we'll get you. They're not his enemies. They're begging him for mercy. They're saying, please don't hurt us. Very interesting that keeps happening. And you have to wonder why. But let's keep going to the horrifying end of this little anecdote. Now there was nigh unto the mountains a great herd of swine feeding, and all the devils besought him, saying, Send us into the swine, that we may enter into them. And forthwith Jesus gave them leave, and the unclean spirits went out and entered into the swine, and the herd ran violently down a steep place into the sea. There were about 2,000, and were choked in the sea. What did those swine ever do to Jesus that he condemns them to death? They were just crazy. And suddenly they're possessed and thrown to the sea. That's always hard for me to read. 2,000 pigs, dead for no reason at all. Why can't Jesus tell the spirits to just leave? Why do they have to go from one host to another? If he can command them, why does something have to die? 2,000 people. Why do they have to die? Why can't he just tell the spirits, I don't care if you want to be in the neighborhood. You're obviously not in the neighborhood anyway. But the spirit says, don't send them out of the country. But then they go into pigs that immediately die. So how are they not out of the country anyway? Anyway. And they that fed the swine fled and told it in the city and in the country. And they went out to see what it was that was done. And they come to Jesus and see him that was possessed with the devil and had the legion, sitting and clothed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. And they saw it told them how it befell him that he was possessed with the devil, and also concerning the swine. You notice Mark has problems with antecedents. He's saying he and they, without really telling you who's what. It can be tricky to follow. This is not well written. Not at all an endemic characteristic. A couple of other Gospels are well written, but this is a mess. And they began to pray to him to depart out of their coasts. So unlike the healed people, they're not happy that this guy's around. He's just destroyed a whole livelihood. He's just destroyed someone's whole world. A herd of 2,000 pigs is dead. And when he was come into the ship, he that had been possessed with the devil prayed him that he might be with him. Howbeit Jesus suffered him not, but saith unto him, Go home to thy friends, and tell them how great things the Lord hath done for thee, and hath had compassion on thee. And he departed, and began to publish in Decapolis how great things Jesus had done for him, and all men did marvel. So this one time Jesus is perfectly willing. In fact, he instructs the man to go and tell people what happened, instead of telling him to be quiet and not do anything. Pretty interesting change. Jesus hasn't done that up until now. But also notice the people in the area of the Gadarenes ask him to go, and he does. They don't want him around, and Mark doesn't tell us why. We have to assume that it's this horrifying destruction of an entire herd of swine. Maybe it's a collective herd. Maybe it belonged to everybody in the neighborhood. Certainly one person wouldn't have 2,000 pigs. They ask him to go. They don't say, oh, you're a wonder worker, and, notice no crowds of sick people or possessed people come out to see him. The whole neighborhood wants him gone, and he agrees. We don't see that conversation, but he agrees. And when Jesus was passed again over by ship unto the other side, much people gathered unto him, and he was nigh unto the sea. And behold, there cometh one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name. And when he saw him, he fell at his feet, and besought him greatly, saying, My little daughter lieth at the point of death. I pray thee, come and lay thy hands on her, that she may be healed, and she shall live. And Jesus went with him, and much people followed him, and thronged him. And a certain woman, which had an issue of blood 12 years, and had suffered many things of many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was nothing bettered. I'm right there with you, sister. That hasn't changed in 2,000 years. But rather grew worse, when she heard of Jesus, came into the press behind and touched his garment. For she said, If I may touch but his clothes, I shall be whole. And straightway the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of that plague. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that virtue had gone out of him, turned him about in the press, and said, Who touched my clothes? And his disciples said unto him, Thou seest the multitude thronging thee, and thou sayest thou, Who touched thee? In other words, how on earth can you know? People are all around you. And he looked round about to see her that had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what was done in her, came and fell down before him, and told him all the truth. And he said unto her, Daughter, thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace, and be whole of thy plague. One of the most fascinating incidents in the whole New Testament. Jesus heals her without knowing it. So what are we to make of this? Does he have some sort of energy field? He knows that someone accessed it, but all these people touching him aren't accessing it, just the one person who wants to be healed. He heals her without knowing it, and knows that he has, after the fact. He knows that power has gone out of him. Virtue is what it's called in this translation, but he knows that power has gone out of him and been used to some effect. That note is so odd. To me, it stands out a country mile and seems to come from some sort of broader narrative tradition, more narrative details than we have. That is strange. That almost feels eyewitness, because it doesn't make any sense at all. But anyway, let's finish up here. While he yet spake, there came from the ruler of the synagogue's house a certain which said, Thy daughter is dead. Why troublest thou the master any further? So Jairus got there too late. Someone from his household said, Don't need to bother this guy anymore. There's nothing he can do. As soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he saith unto the ruler of the synagogue, Be not afraid, only believe. And he suffered no man to follow him, save Peter and James and John, the brother of James. And he cometh to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and seeth the tumult, and them that wept and wailed greatly. And when he was come in, he saith unto them, Why make ye this ado, and weep? The damsel is not dead, but sleepeth. And they laughed him to scorn. But when he had put them all out, he taketh the father and mother of the damsel, and them that were with him, and entered in where the damsel was lying. And he took the damsel by the hand, and said unto her, Talitha cumi, which is, being interpreted, Damsel, I say unto thee, arise. And straightway the damsel arose and walked, for she was of the age of 12 years. And they were astonished with a great astonishment. And he charged them straitly that no man should know of it, and commanded that something should be given her to eat. So he is back to telling people not to tell anyone about this. And that's interesting. But another interesting factor here, a huge interesting thing, those two things, really, to me, are the interesting things about this chapter. One is that he heals someone without knowing it, until after it happens. It's like he has some sort of electromagnetic field around him that someone taps into in one particular way that gets his attention. No one else touching him does that. But when it happens, he knows it. That's one thing. He tells the poor woman that her faith has saved her, but we don't know what she has faith in except him as a wonder worker. We've heard almost nothing that this man is saying about how to live your life or how to be good. Almost nothing. And in the last chapter that we read, Jesus himself says that not only has he said very little, but he said it intentionally couched in impenetrable parables. Parables that he does not want people to understand. So it's kind of weird. We're getting a phenomenon here without ever learning what it is. We're just getting the outer trappings of a phenomenon. But that part about him healing someone without knowing it, that's fascinating to me. And another fascinating thing, another thing that strikes me, maybe not eyewitness, maybe that was the wrong way to put it, but definitely Mark using a source that's right in front of him. The writer of these texts that we're reading is not very bright. He's certainly not a literary craftsman on his own. You get to see the clear sensation that he is taking this from other works, earlier works of literature that we don't have. We don't know what they are. This is another example of that really strikes me, that he leaves in the untranslated phrase. Talitha Kumi. I doubt very much that whoever wrote this originally knew both those languages. That strikes me also as a very raw chunk of verisimilitude. Not so much eyewitness as older, as a piece of something older and unpolished lodged in the narrative of Mark. I think it's fascinating, just fascinating. It's not often that we get Jesus being this way, this enigmatic. But there we have the story for chapter 5. And what we have is basically more of the same. When we talk about Jesus getting in a ship and going across the sea, we're talking about a boat, and we're talking about the Sea of Galilee, which doesn't take long to go across. Don't let the language fool you. But he goes to the other side of the Sea of Galilee and once again starts working wonders. They're not quite the same. We still get fugitive mentions of throngs of people, but the wonders themselves don't seem quite the same. He heals the man of the evil spirit, but he does it at such a catastrophe, such a catastrophe to the people of the Gadarean region, sending in a gigantic 2,000 pigs off a cliff into the sea, that they don't want him around. They don't throw things at him, but they ask him to leave. And he does leave. They don't want him around, even if it means healing people. They want him gone from their territory. That's a weird kind of wonder working. And also, oddly enough, a wonderful road not taken. Imagine if that man who had been possessed did become a disciple. He asked to. Usually people ask to, if they're perfectly willing, Jesus takes them. But not here. Instead, he specifically tells that man to go and tell people what happened. That's also a little bit odd. And also the final miracle, which is private. It's done inside a room, and Jesus tells the people who are eyewitnesses, don't tell anybody. Of course, that doesn't help all the people who are outside who know perfectly well the girl was dead, so they're all going to talk. But it's not so much that. I mean, he's back to telling people don't publicize what I just did. But the fact that he would use that phrase, that is interesting. That sticks out from the other wonder-working accounts that we've seen so far. But that is the story so far. We're dealing with an itinerant wonder worker who's now crossed back over the Sea of Galilee, and we will move on in the next chapter. So we'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.